Joining us here from ESPN, the columnist who I enjoy all of his work right here. He's Bill Barnwell here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Bill?
Hey, Rich, how's it going?
I'm great, thank you. Man, you're senior writer of ESPN and the host of the Bill Barnwell Show podcast right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Love this idea that you had today. Pardon me if I don't know if this has been an annual thing that you've done before the draft, but to kind of counterbalance all these mock drafts with no trades, you do a mock draft with all trades. I kind of dig that idea, Bill. I kind of dig that.
Yeah, we have a lot of free time on our hands these days when it comes to NFL content.
Because I know, I mean, so many of these are far-fetched, but
Yes.
I mean, the concept that you had at the first overall position, it's very wild to even have a 3-team parlay at the top of a draft. I don't recall that ever being possible. But I mean, you're not out of the realm. I mean, this isn't totally a crazy idea. I give you the floor on how you came up with the idea that the Dolphins move up and get Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think, you want to have some semblance of logic, right? You want to say, if this is true, then how could we make this work? So let's say you're the Bengals and you're picking first overall, and you think, hey, Joe Burrow's a great prospect. And I think the Bengals are going to take Joe Burrow with the first overall pick, but let's say you prefer Justin Herbert or Tua Tagovailoa. You could move down to 3, and then you could get that guy and let the Dolphins, if they want Joe Burrow. We've heard rumors say they don't want necessarily Tua Tagovailoa. We've heard different things about the Dolphins. Maybe they move up to 1 from 5 and they get Joe Burrow. The Bengals move down to 3 and they get the quarterback they want. And the Lions, who want a defensive player, move down to 5. They get an extra pick in the process. The Bengals get an extra pick in the process, and the Dolphins get the guy who might be the best quarterback prospect in the last 30 years. Who knows? So, I think that it makes sense for the Bengals to take Joe Burrow, but if they have questions, then this is an alternative that could make some sense.
And then another alternative that the Dolphins you have some fun with right here, acquiring Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys. Where'd you cook this one up, Bill?
Okay, so this did not go over well in Dallas, but here's my point, and this is the logic behind what I'm thinking here.
Yes.
If you're the Dallas Cowboys, you have not signed Dak Prescott yet. You have not met his terms. His price is only going to go up over the next couple of years as more quarterbacks sign, as the cap goes up. He's only going to get more expensive. The last time a team started doing this with their quarterback, where they started going through the franchise tags, was Kirk Cousins. That turned out to be a disaster for Washington, where they got a third-round compensatory pick. They had to trade for Alex Smith. They drafted Dwayne Haskins. They've used so much capital to try and replace Kirk Cousins when they could have traded him, when they decided, hey, we're not going to give this guy an extension. He's not worth it. We're going to go year to year. So if you're the Cowboys and you think, hey, we're just not coming to terms on a deal with Dak Prescott, then this is the time to make a trade, not next year when he's one offseason away from free agency, not 2 years from now when you don't have any leverage. You make the trade now. And if you have a quarterback like a Tua Tagovailoa who you're in love with, then, hey, move up, trade Dak Prescott, get that quarterback now, and you can build around that quarterback, and you have an expensive roster elsewhere. And for the Dolphins, I mean, the Dolphins are a team that looked really good in December, beat the Patriots. They've added a ton of talent this offseason, and Tom Brady is no longer in that division. So if you're the Dolphins, you might be very interested in Tua Tagovailoa or Justin Herbert, and those guys I think are going to be good quarterbacks. But Dak Prescott is a guy where his floor is pretty high right now. He is a very talented quarterback, and that division, without Tom Brady, might be there for the taking. So you might think, okay, we can rebuild in 1 year and suddenly have a quarterback who might be able to win us a division title in 2020, which nobody was expecting for the Dolphins a few months ago.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that AFC East conversation for a second and just linger a little bit with your scenarios and try and inject a little bit of reality into it. That, although, hey, you never know in this crazy world, certainly a week before the draft. The Tua market, what are you hearing, Bill, about Tua's market right now?
I think we're seeing a lot of teams who are willing to throw, smoke screens out there. We're seeing teams who, are interested at the right price. But I think it's so difficult because teams don't have the medical information they would typically feel comfortable with when it comes to these prospects. We're seeing the same thing with Jadeveon Clowney, right, in free agency, where you're not going to give a guy $40 or $50 million guaranteed when you don't know if he's totally healthy. With Tua, I mean, the pro day looked good, but we've seen a million pro days before. Pro days are so different from actual game action. And if you're a GM and you draft Tua with the 3rd pick or the 5th pick or the 6th pick, and he's not healthy, you're going to get fired. And I think you're seeing teams who the moment of truth might be on draft day when you have to actually sit there with your owner and with your head coach in that, on a Zoom call and say, hey, are we willing to risk our jobs to go after Tua Tagovailoa, who I think is an incredibly talented player, but who we just don't know how healthy he is.
Well, you saw, Bill, on your own, I guess, a family of networks, ESPN Plus, the Great Details series that we saw the late Kobe Bryant. I can't believe I'm saying those words. Peyton Manning and now Nick Saban lend their remarkable brain equity to. Saban essentially saying Tua getting hurt. And he echoed the sentiments that Trent Dilfer told me when Trent walked me through how they have rebuilt Tua's base, is that he did too much, extended the play way too long, and the base of his ability to throw is now going to prevent him from having to run and extend plays that Saban says cost him his health in every single way, shape, or form, and that won't be the case in the pros.
Yeah, it's tough. I think about guys like Andrew Luck, for example. Well, that was always going to be the story with Andrew Luck, but we got to get him to stay out of those situations. He has to stay healthy. I just don't know if you can coach that out of a guy. Maybe you can. I mean, hey, Nick Saban knows a lot more about football than I do, and I think it's going to be, Tua's going to be with the best coaches on the planet when it comes to the National Football League. But I think there's something innate about certain quarterbacks where they just want to keep extending plays, they just want to make things happen, and I don't know how successful you can really be in the long term of coaching out of a player's skill set. Maybe for a year, maybe for a few games here or there.
Right.
Maybe if you keep reminding the guy. But it's just, I think about Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin, just guys who are so talented. Carson Wentz, another example, where they're so talented and they're so tough and they want to just make plays happen. And I think just in the heat of the moment, just your natural instincts take over for quarterbacks. And I think that could be the case with Tua as well.
I know, and I know we're going crazy. Bill Barnwell here on the Rich Eisen Show. I know we're going crazy about Burrow and Tua, or it's going to be Burrow and Herbert and Tua all attached at the hip. I mean, you just mentioned again Luck, RG3, Mariota, obviously, and Winston. You can also go on even with Goff and Wentz. One of them has made a Super Bowl. Wentz still, to this very moment, has not won a playoff game as a quarterback in the NFL. And I'm just wondering what, about how we view this. Like now we're 5+ years in for a lot of these guys, and seeing them on different teams, what this means at the top of a draft, choosing a quarterback, and how risky it really, really, really is, Bill.
Yeah, it's super risky, but I think the reward is so valuable. I mean, we're seeing quarterbacks now get, typically top-end quarterbacks, we're looking at about $35 million a year, somewhere in the $30 to $35 million range, depending on where you are in your career. So the opportunity to get someone like a Carson Wentz for 4 years at $7 million a year, it's just so valuable. It lets you do so much else with your football team. And if you are in the opposite situation, if you're someone like the Seahawks with Russell Wilson, where he was so cheap and they were able to add so much talent to that roster, once he got expensive, it really made it more difficult for them to compete for a couple of years. They kind of had to, adjust to that new sort of economic paradigm. So, I just think that even if the hit rate is 50-50, maybe that's fair to say. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think the hit rate is for those first round?
I don't know, Bill. I mean, it's just, the hit rate in terms at the top of the draft, right? I mean, You want to talk Mahomes where he was taken, Watson where he was taken, Lamar Jackson where he was taken, Jimmy G where he was taken. I mean, at the top of the draft, a top 5 drafted quarterback. I mean, again, I'm just going off the top of my dome here about somebody that was taken top 5, transformative, and then we got the teams got what they needed, which was using their first iteration of their contract where they're not breaking the bank to the tune of a large percentage of the cap and winning right there to spread it around to the rest of the team. Like, that's the idea. That's what the Seattle Seahawks obviously did with Russell Wilson, what the Chiefs have been able to pull off with Mahomes and might be able to do again. That's why I'm saying, like, maybe you sit back and wait and you find your guy later in the draft in the same way that you talk about running backs and wide receivers. Maybe we could start thinking about quarterbacks that way. I'm honestly, just like your article, just spitballing here, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally plausible. Look at that draft from a couple of years ago where, Sam Darnold came off the board third. We still don't know what's happening with Sam Darnold because obviously, they haven't been able to surround him with enough talent. Lamar Jackson was, 32? I think he was either 31 or 32.
He was the last pick of the draft. Yeah, the last pick of the first round.
First round, yeah.
In Dallas.
That turned out okay for the Ravens. He seems to be pretty good.
Sure did.
at the end of the day, I think when you have these quarterbacks as talented as they are, so much of what we're going to see is about what you put around them, the talent you put around them, the players you put around them. Look at Josh Allen, a guy who we all kind of thought, okay, he's a prospect coming out of school, major question marks. Josh Allen looked pretty good last year, and because the Bills spent so much in terms of draft capital, in terms of free agency, starting him with a solid offensive line, starting him with the receivers he needed, a running game that was effective, and put Josh Allen in a situation where he didn't have to be that guy like a Luck or a Griffin or a Wentz where he had to put the team on his back and make plays. He had to be kind of selective and not turn the ball over, and they had a long winning streak because Josh Allen was able to play that brand of football. So I think so much of this comes down to not just the talents of the player, but also the coaching staff,
and I think
the scheme he's in.
Yeah, I think, and to put a button on this whole part of our conversation, Bill, you touched upon at the beginning here about an interesting concept that I don't think we've seen, which is the rest of the AFC East seeing a window of opportunity to push a button now and win now and take advantage of the now with Brady out of the division. You're throwing out all these scenarios that the Dolphins might actually go and hit the win it now button with either a trade or what they're doing in the draft. And then the Bills going and getting Stephon Diggs and what they're doing. Do you think that this is the Bills division to lose right now in 2020?
I do. Yeah, I mean, the Bills were, honestly, I thought they outplayed the Patriots in those two games last year. Now, granted, they lost both games, but they both came down to a few points here and there. I think a blocked punt in the first game and then that last drive from Josh Allen in the second game where I thought the Bills were the better team of the two in those two games. And then the Patriots lose Tom Brady. They lost a bunch of players from that defense that really carried them last season. They're a team that's in transition. We don't know what Jared Stidham's going to be. Maybe he's going to be great. You never want to count Bill Belichick out, but at the end of the day, if you're the Bills and you've been waiting 20 years for your chance, if you're the Dolphins and you've been waiting 20 years for your chance, or you're the Jets in the same boat, you have to feel like this is your opportunity, and you have to feel like if the right situation, approaches, you don't want to spend money for the sake of spending money, but I think the Stephon Diggs trade is perfect, where it's, hey, we're going to take a risk, but we've built this strong culture. This is a superstar player we don't have access to elsewhere. Let's see if we can kind of take that leap and be the dominant team in this division. So I do think the Bills are in the driver's seat, but if the defense slips, if Josh Allen doesn't play well next year, which, hey, I mean, we've seen a lot of guys look at in year 2, struggle in year 3. Mitch Trubisky comes to mind as a recent example. I think the Dolphins could be in position to possibly compete for a division title, and I think that has to at least be in your mind if you're one of these 3 other teams in the AFC East.
ESPN senior writer Bill Barnwell here on the Rich Eisen Show. One of the things I really like about your work is you can really go deep and connect dots and use salary caps and take what trades in the past have netted in terms of draft choices and put it all together. So that's my backdrop for asking you, what are the Texans doing? What is Bill O'Brien doing from the acquisition of David Johnson and sending away DeAndre Hopkins and the acquisition of Brandon Cooks? Put this all together for me, Bill.
Oh, boy. I don't even know if I have enough time in my hands to figure out the magic and mystery of what Bill O'Brien is doing. Here's what I would say. I think about, Bill O'Brien worked underneath Bill Belichick. I think about what Bill Belichick would do in situations in the past. He's traded away those wide receivers when he felt like they were kind of past their point of being useful to the team. Terry Glenn comes to mind at the beginning of the Patriots dynasty. Randy Moss recently. They've traded away veterans from those Patriots teams for years. They just let Tom Brady leave. So you figure anyone can go, but I just think we're seeing a guy who, doesn't think about the draft the same way other teams think about the draft, kind of sees those picks as more replaceable perhaps than they should be. So, going out and getting a Duke Johnson, that's a totally fine player, totally solid player. Giving up a third-round pick to do so when he's probably going to get cut if the Browns didn't get a trade offer doesn't make a lot of sense. The Laremy Tunsil trade, hey, you're getting a superstar left tackle in the prime of his career. That's totally fine. I understand giving up a lot of draft capital to make that happen, but you have to sign him to a contract when you do it, because otherwise he's going to have you go for a barrel. He can do whatever he wants in terms of leverage because he knows you're not going to let me go after you traded 2 first-round picks to make this deal happen. So I think we're just seeing a guy who doesn't think about things from the value perspective when it comes to making these trades and just thinks about players, which is part of the job. But that's the coaching side of the job. From the GM side of the job, you have to understand what the picks are worth, what the contract situation is, how the cap works, and I think we're seeing Bill O'Brien really struggle with that side of things when it comes to the trades he's making.
Well, I mean, the letter grades you've given him for the Hopkins trade and then the Cooks trade, they get progressively worse to the point where we're seeing letters of the alphabet we usually don't see associated with grades. So because what you're paying Cooks, right? You would have paid close to what Hopkins wanted, and you keep a guy there that the team and the city already wants to stay and can go after Andre Johnson's team records if he keeps going there, right? And then I guess you say I took Carlos Hyde from the Chiefs, and he's a 1,000-yard rusher, and my system can do that for David Johnson. It's really just I'm scratching my head right now, Bill. You're not seeing it, but I'll just describe to you. I'm literally scratching my head. That said, though, we were wondering what the hell's he doing trading away Clowney like that, and then doing what he did with Tunsil. Guy had a several touchdown lead on the road against the eventual Super Bowl champs. We all know what happened, but that's why I'm trying to say, like, is there a possibility he does have a method here and his madness will actually work? Bill?
Of course. I mean, these are talented players. Brandon Cooks is a good football player. Larry Tunsil's an excellent left tackle. I don't think the issue here is necessarily, the players in a vacuum, but it's just, you have to win a Super Bowl to make this work, right? Look at the Rams. The Rams traded a ton of their draft picks away. They built around a core of 9 or 10 guys, and they made it to the Super Bowl. They came within a touchdown of winning that Super Bowl. They made that one tip pass away from winning the Super Bowl. And if they win, all the stuff we've seen this offseason about how they failed, how the Gurley contract, the Cooks contract haven't worked, doesn't matter because they have a Super Bowl in their building, and that's all that you care about at the end of the day. So that's a really high bar. And granted, like you said, they were up 20 points, I think, on the Chiefs in the divisional round. They were also trailing to the Bills in the wild card round. This is a team that I think you look at the numbers for the Texans, you would figure even before these trades they were likely to decline next year. There were some things about their performance, especially in close games, that makes you think they're going to struggle in 2020. And if that happens, the guy who comes to mind for me is Chip Kelly, right? A guy who, had his team in the playoffs, looked like he really had, he was sort of the next modern great coach. He gets that GM power, makes some moves we kind of have questions about. Adds a bunch of running backs, trades for Sam Bradford, signs Byron Maxwell to a huge contract. When it doesn't work out, the Eagles said, hey, you're not a good GM, you're a coach. And they fired him from both jobs. Ended up being downhill from there for Chip Kelly. So I don't want Bill O'Brien to get fired. I think he's done a good enough job as a coach to deserve plenty of time as the coach there in Houston. But if this does kind of fail, you have to figure it's going to fail pretty spectacularly, and it's going to be quite disappointing, and it could lead to some dramatic changes for the Texans. Now, we obviously have to see, but I think, it's going to be so much on Deshaun Watson and those new receivers to gel together in a very difficult and very uncommon offseason. It could be a situation where it does take them some time to gel, and then at that point, the Texans could already be, kind of trying to catch up.
Before I let you go, Bill Barnwell, this conversation was all born out of your 32 picks, 32 trades article on ESPN.com today, where you're just throwing a bunch of trades out there that may or may not happen, most likely not. And the conversation in the NFL world, because of a report coming out of New York City, that Odell might be on the move again to Minnesota for a 2 and a 5. I'm wondering what you think of, if you want to grade that possible deal between the Browns and the Vikings, if this does in fact happen in this manner, Bill.
It'd be interesting. I would kind of be in the middle for both of them. I think in the C-plus range for both of them, because I could see the Vikings adding him, but if you just traded Stephon Diggs, you're in a draft that has a ton of wide receiver talent. Why are you going to go out and get Odell at this point when he's making $14 million a year and you want to be a team that runs the football? I can't imagine Odell is going to be thrilled with that offense. And then from the Browns side, you just traded for Odell Beckham, and granted, you've changed your GM, you've changed your head coach. You might have some different feelings here, but this is a Browns team that needs to figure out what they have with Baker Mayfield. You can't wait any longer. You have to see what you have in year 3. And Jarvis Landry had hip surgery. He's already out for pretty much the entirety of the offseason. He's a question mark for week 1. So even given that this is a great draft for wide receivers, I just don't see why you would sell low on Odell Beckham and possibly head into week 1 of a not a must win, but a must improve season for Baker Mayfield with 2 rookie wide receivers or, a couple backups at wide receiver just doesn't seem like it makes sense for them at the time. But hey, the Giants said we didn't sign Odell Beckham to trade him, and then 5 months later they traded him. So anything is possible in the NFL.
Bill, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it. Everybody check out Bill's podcast and, of course, all of his great work on ESPN and ESPN.com. Appreciate the time, Bill. Appreciate it.
It's an honor, Mr. Eisen. Anytime.
Oh, please. Right back at you, Bill. It's Bill Barnwell here on the show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.